We had an old timer. Well, we use Clancy's name. I'll use his name. Tom Ivester. He's in the big meeting now. Died with 65 years of good, long, continuous, service-based sobriety. And when they did his memorial service, one of his pigeons, sponsored by Tom for 40 years or more, he said, almost everybody comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. If they stay a little while, the individual gets better. But every now and then, somebody comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, and in short order, they realize that they can make AA better.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you're all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas. That was the voice of Mr. Jimmy D that you heard at the beginning of this here episode number 378. And you are going to hear so much more from Jimmy D in just a moment. But first things first, this episode is made possible by Gary, Adrian, and Bill. So you ask yourself, what exactly did Gary, Adrian, Bill do? Adrian and Bill do? Well, they swung by our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on the little yellow donate tab, and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Gary, Adrian, and Bill, here in this new year, the year of 2025. Thank you so much. This here episode is coming right out to you'ns. As always, we're going to let everybody else listen on in at the same time, but I appreciate y'all's contribution. All right. We're going to get right into this today because you are going to want to, this is one you're going to want to maybe take some notes on, maybe rewind, hit that little, back 15 seconds button every once in a while and hear what Jimmy has to say. We are calling this one Make AA Better. Jimmy is from Dallas, Texas. He is a past delegate in Alcoholics Anonymous, but most recently a former Southwest Regional Trustee. And it's been a long time since we've interviewed Jimmy, and I'm so glad to have him back. We really do cover a wide array of topics with Jimmy. If you have been listening to the podcast for, more than a couple of years or so, you're going to recognize Jimmy, you'll recognize his voice. And we've had many other episodes with Jimmy. We're talking about a story and some other things, but this time we're going to be talking about, a couple things. The idea of what you would call a home office in New York, and how they do or do not dictate policies, procedures, whatever you want to call it, throughout Alcoholics Anonymous. The Plain Language Book. And if you don't know what the Plain Language Book is, listen on in. It'll be probably very intriguing for you, especially for those of you who have been around for a while. The language that should or should not be included in the preamble and the debate over that, the subject of anonymity, a service sponsor and what that is, what it entails. Some of you may have heard of it before. Some of you may not have. And the matter of, quote, no opinions on outside issues and what that means to different people. Have you ever been in a meeting and you find somebody walks in with a shirt and something's printed on that shirt, maybe that you personally find offensive? What do you do in a case like that, right? We discussed this. And much, much more. That is just the tip of the iceberg. And as always, we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode. Enjoy, Jimmy D. Okay, everybody. So today we are sitting here, and he's already grinning ear to ear. We are sitting here with Jimmy D. And it's been a while since Jimmy has been with us, and I'm so glad he's back here in Studio AA. I don't know if you know if I call it.
It did not have that moniker the last time I was here, but I like it.
Yeah, well, in fact, I don't want to take credit for it. It's a gentleman named Ernie, who I used to call it Studio A. Right? We had a Studio A. Sometimes we'd have a Studio B at Crested Butte or wherever we were. It was for Studio B. And Ernie came up to me one day at a meeting and he said, you ought to call it Studio AA. And I said, I don't like that. I like that a lot. So anyway, here we are with Studio AA. So Jimmy, I'm going to have you go ahead, introduce yourself, give you sobriety date if you wish, and tell people where you live in this great land of ours, please.
Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy. I'm alcoholic and I am sober since August the 25th of 1997. Dallas, Texas is my hometown.
Dallas, Texas. Yes.
Big D.
Yeah, Big D. And so we've had you on, I don't know, 5-6 times.
A few times.
Before, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's been probably a couple years.
It has been. It's been a while. You and I have kind of danced around the topic and the calendars just didn't mesh.
Yes.
Right.
And then there was a lady who reached out to me. I told you that she had reached out to me, and she had said, I was searching your podcast to try to find Jimmy D, and I found him, and then I just met him at a conference.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know where you were speaking. You speak a lot, right?
I go probably about once a month, right, on average, right? And there have been several places where, you have some depth in the fellowship, right, which I think is good. I mean, people are aware of the podcast and have really, I believe I think it's impactful and actually somewhat necessary. So I'm glad that you provide this service.
Oh, well, God bless you. I appreciate it. It's as I call it, a labor of love.
Yes, absolutely.
For all of us, right? We do everything for the most part for fun and for free. And I know, for example, that year, explain to people the position you had. I know at the bottom of the totem pole as a trustee. Explain to people what that was you had for a couple of years.
So I was elected. I came off the General Service Board. It's a 4-year term for the alcoholic trustees. So I came on the General Service Board as the Southwest Regional Trustee in 2019 and came off the board in April of 2023. So I've been rotated a little over a year.
And you were busy during that time.
I was busy. All trustees have ample things to do. And of course, we had the pandemic during my term. We closed the General Service Office during my term. We canceled the International Convention during my term. So there were some things that the board, I believe, collectively was challenged with vision in a way that perhaps, which is certainly one of the concepts. It's a fundamental reason for the board's existence, right? Not to give any direction, right? Serving the fellowship only, right? They are at the bottom of the triangle, but to exercise some degree of vision. In other words, to have the opportunity to sit back and say, what is the current landscape of AA? What might be the future landscape of AA? And are there discussions that could be seeded in the fellowship, right? All based on whether or not the fellowship would have appetite for a discussion in order to kind of not necessarily map our future, right? Because I believe, it's within a higher power's design. But what would AA maybe do or not do in order to more effectively carry its message, right? And so we didn't have, none of the members of AA had. We didn't have an article from the Grapevine magazine that Bill wrote that said, "Here's the way we process the pandemic," right? So we existed in a flying blind time, unlike any other. And so there were a lot of discussions that I don't believe they didn't need to be had before. Right?
You mentioned that the general service offices got closed.
Sure, for over a year.
Oh,
right, during the pandemic.
Okay, gotcha.
Sure.
But
now people went home and teleworked, but we had no prior experience with anyone at GSO not physically coming to an office every day. Right. So just like I learned how to telework, in my profession, we were kind of learning what telework and teleservice would look like in Alcoholics Anonymous.
It's interesting. I remember when I first started this podcast that getting people on a podcast. Now you were a trailblazer.
I threw in, give me an opportunity to talk.
Right.
I mean, in person, not in person,
right.
Virtual. Okay. I'm good.
You were good with it, but a lot of people that I talked to just if I wanted to record them remotely even, it was like pulling teeth, But then the pandemic came along and, all the Zoom meetings, and it got much easier to get people on the podcast, and they were, they just got used to it.
Well, I think we still have maybe some ongoing discussion, maybe some unresolved issues around, how public, right? But I think all of us learned, if we didn't already know, that Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so the opportunity for us to possess and exercise personal anonymity, the fellowship is not anonymous. Mm-hmm. And I would actually say that collectively, and this is all glass half full, the deportment of the fellowship improved when it knew that everybody was watching. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And this is something, this actually just came up at a meeting I was at just, 30 minutes ago before we got here. An hour ago, I should say. But I was talking to a gentleman because I had actually called him out once during a meeting because he got up. It was a birthday party, and he got up and started taking some pictures. And I said, "Hey, buddy, you can't be doing that." And the reason, and I told him, it had been on my mind for quite some time because, I don't, I'm not the enforcer kind of guy. I just never have been. I'm more of a kind of, hey, let's everybody get along kind of guy. And you need a little bit of everything, right? You need the enforcers and you need
sure.
Let's have everybody get along. But so I saw Clancy once Gosh, I was in Wisconsin. This was probably in 1995, right in that area. And it was a big auditorium, and somebody got up during the middle of it. They had a camera. It was a traditional camera, like a digital camera. I don't think it was all the cell phone stuff. And they started to take a picture of him. And he, rightly so, he lambasted him and said, no pictures in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
And so I was trying to tell this gentleman I was talking to, he's a great guy. His name's Justin. I was talking to Justin and I said, you know, I've thought about that ever since I said it. But by the same token, I know that like I've had a Sober Speak Live event and I gave people, you know, a code to stream in live for me and the guest. I can't remember. I know you were Sober Speak Live. I don't remember if we streamed that or not. And I was also just at a ICYPAW conference.
Oh, yeah. You went to Austin?
I did.
Good.
There was like 2,500 people there.
Yes. I heard it was very well attended.
It was great. It was great. But there was a lot of cameras in that audience. You know, people would stand up, they'd say, hey, you know, is Hawaii here? And all Hawaii would stand up and people were taking pictures. And so I know that there's a lot of gray area here. And do you have any experience with that or any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the old man from California, because at the Texas State Convention in Austin 10, 12 years ago, it was before, you know, Clancy always talked on Saturday night. I mean, that was his deal, and at least for decades. And there was a young woman, the room was full, and she walked down the center aisle of that ballroom. Nobody had started, but they were all assembled at the dais. Now, the steps and traditions, the window shades were behind them. And so I remember whispering, I could hear it, that when she walked down the center aisle, I would assume fairly new in sobriety, a young woman, and Clancy saw her. You could tell that, I hate to say it, but they said, you know, he's going to let her have it, right? And he went to the podium and spoke into the microphone and said, please, please, don't ever take a picture in any gathering of Alcoholics Anonymous with identifiable symbols that are of Alcoholics Anonymous without everyone's permission. And it was a I don't know thing, right?
Right.
So identifiable symbols, and maybe thinking about, you know, what that means. So for example, if, you know, you and I are at a group anniversary, and we don't have, you know, maybe we even have a sticky name tag or something like that. But if we stand, you know, by the doorway of the facility where we're gathering and we take a picture, okay, no big deal, right? But if we're on an AA lectern, or, you know, we have any, steps, traditions, the book Alcoholics Anonymous, any AA branding, I know that's an ugly word in AA, but AA branding anywhere around us, then we should think well about not doing that, unless everyone has given their permission. And I don't know in today's world whether we think about it or not, but it's very easy for anyone who is coming to AA or thinking about coming to AA to assume that somehow we represent AA. And that's really so much more, I think, of our problem. I'd like to think, you know, I'm liked and well respected, you know, in the world at large. But I can certainly tell you that from a business perspective, there are people who would think long and hard about coming to AA if they knew I was in it, right? And I don't ever want anybody to have some preconceived notion that might prevent them from availing themselves of the opportunity if they need what we have.
Yeah.
Right? So
how do you dance around that, right, in practicality? So do you tell everybody at the ICYPAW conference, no
Yes.
cameras? Okay.
You make an announcement at every meeting, and you make sure, in fact, I would say, especially with an event like ICYPAW, that the website would advise me when I registered or when I got on the website to, we have an anonymity statement, right? But to also say, you know, based on whether or not it is their group conscience, right? But hopefully that the group conscience of the event has said, we spend not a lot of money, but we spend at least a few $1,000s every 5 years to anonymize the picture of the big meeting at the International Convention.
Right.
We want to make sure that no face in that stadium can be easily identified. And we've had a lot of discussions at the bottom of the triangle over the years about whether or not new technology would allow you to open the root photo or the
Yeah.
actual file itself and somehow take pixels out, put pixels in. I mean, that's not my forte, but actually find out that, and you know what it is it's alcoholic ego, because you know what part of the stadium you sat in, and you want to make sure you can see your face in the crowd,
Yeah.
right? And the whole point of taking the photo is to show the broad spectrum, the broad demographic, certainly the reach of alcoholism, no respecter of any class of person, but also that Alcoholics Anonymous, if you suffer from a drinking problem, that we have your answer.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. And with social media, people breaking their anonymity on social media, even I know podcasters that say, this is my full name, this is my image, and I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I've just chose not to do that. I'm not saying they're wrong or right, but I think according to the traditions, you're not supposed to do that.
Right. I mean, I think two primary ways that we can, I don't want to say violate the tradition, but boy, we infringe on the tradition regarding anonymity is when we, at the public level, either actually public or potentially public, if we give our first and last name and that we offer our membership in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? The other way is that's, I think, just as detrimental to the well-being of our society is when we're too anonymous from each other.
Right.
Because in Alcoholics Anonymous, I need to know who you are.
That's right.
Right? And I realize some people take them a long time to, for lack of a better term, let their guard down, right? But a lot of times people are watching, and we've never actually had an actual discussion, and they want to be able to, to reach out, right? And if you appear to be approachable, and that's just de facto by being in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think you've said, I'm approachable, right? I may not have much experience at this point, but what little experience I have, I'm willing to share it.
We never really know where we're going when we get together.
I'm sorry. That's probably tangential, but
no, it's not.
Right?
It's great. I love it. And that's what I mean is like, I get together with you. We say a little prayer at the beginning of this and then just crank up the mic and see where the conversation.
I like that. I like the impromptu, you know what I mean? The unscripted. I think that's what makes it certainly makes it fun. And I think it's just the way that, it's kind of like, who wants to read their talk? You know what I mean? I mean, it should just kind of be like where you are at any particular point in time. And I realize there might be, 2 or 3 major events that you want to make sure that you touch on because they're key components of your journey to either in AA or prior to AA. Yeah. But that's like watching paint dry. is people flipping note cards or turning a page or looking at their phone or so. Yeah.
All right. The other thing I wanted to touch on with you while you're here today is I've heard a lot about this, what they call a plain language version of the Big Book. Why don't you explain what that is for people, where it is in the process, what you think about it? And
so the discussions are rooted not in an initial idea to translate the 4th edition. It is, we could have a discussion about whether it's a translation or a rewrite.
Okay, so first of all, what is it? There's some sort of translation. It's called the plain language, right?
Right. So,
and the intent of it is to do
the direction of our conference, which is the AA's group conscience, right, collectively in the U.S. and Canada. The advisory action of the conference was to translate the 4th edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous into plain and simple language, but then making sure that it was as accessible and relatable as possible. Now, that accessibility and relatability was not defined by the conference exactly what that means, right? So I don't want to get, down in the weeds about that specific topic, except to say, does accessibility and relatability mean that the jaywalker becomes a woman? Does accessibility and relatability mean that the Two Wives chapter is named Two Partners? Does accessibility and relatability mean that some, contextual statement in the doctor's opinion is altered in order to, let's just say, make it more palatable and not seem to have such sharp edges, right? What is the phenomenon of craving? How is it defined for us as members of Alcoholics Anonymous, absent any professional counsel or opinion? Because as AA members, we certainly can avail ourselves of that information. But what we know is that we collectively have agreed, if we're students of our basic text, that the phenomenon of craving exists after we take the first drink, right? And so if that is, in fact, let's just say a precept of Alcoholics Anonymous, a fundamental component of our journey, especially when we're new to AA, and I'm not saying that it has been, because I've only read as trustee on a subcommittee the first 4 chapters in their original form, and had the opportunity as a member of that subcommittee to redline those things just as an AA member.
You're talking about the first 4 chapters of plain language.
Right. So the translated first 4 chapters of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Who's writing it?
We contracted with an outside vendor, not a member of AA, who's an expert in plain and simple language, which is a language.
Like AA for dummies, so to speak.
Well, it's and it's not so much about I think particular, and I'm obviously a novice about all of it, but it's not so much about a word itself, but it's about comprehension.
Right.
It's
and
all
that's
about
what those,
comprehension.
and I'm being a little fizzy, but that whole dummies
Sure.
series books, what they do is they take kind of complex sort of subject matter.
Sure.
And then they, dummy it down and dummy in a good way. They just make it more understandable.
Right. I think that the interesting thing is over the time that the book has been in a state of, being produced, which is over a series of years, that, for example, if you ran chapter 5 through an AI bot and told it you wanted plain and simple, it might look radically different from what we're actually going to see in the text of the plain and simple language book. Whether or not that's modification for accessibility and readability will be up to members of AA.
Gotcha.
And whether or not, one of the things that I've thought about, because I'll pose questions because for discussion, not for for anybody to not to seed any controversy, but just about having robust discussions in especially in AA, is Bill Wilson did not write the book Alcoholics Anonymous solely and individually.
Right.
It's the collective experience of the first 70 odd people that were sober in AA. Now, I'm not saying everybody weighed in on every page, but it is a book of experience. So can you rewrite experience?
Good question.
So, I have no conflict with the original, let's say, motivating factor that ultimately got the conference in 2021 to approve the production of that book, which was the accessibility of the message of AA. I mean, I don't know any AA member, new or old, that would say, I don't want the message of AA to be accessible. But how we go about making our message more accessible. I'm not sure that we've had a robust discussion in the fellowship, and I'm not sure how well actually producing the book and already having it is going to help us in AA groups, really certainly US, Canada, but around the world. Is it going to be initially so divisive that we're unwilling or unable to even begin to think about getting together to have the discussion?
More will be revealed.
It will be.
And
it will be. But the book is approved by this year's conference. So in April of 2024, and the margin just is for information, 2/3 of the conference members, they're plus or minus 134 or 135 trustees, delegates, directors, staff members that are members of AA are also voting members of the conference. So all those people gather together, and certainly had, I wasn't in that conference, but I'm sure they had robust discussions around it. It was approved by 5 votes, so by a margin of 5 votes, and evidently in what we would call the waning hours of the meeting, and so I think that at this point there might be some questions around: did we move at the speed of trust?
The speed of trust.
Did we move at the speed of trust? Not to discount passion from members of AA that believe that accessibility is an enormous problem in Alcoholics Anonymous, but again, for purposes of having discussions and drawing out, let's just say, the shyest participant, what makes my home group accessible?
Right. So, and I want to bring up another subject with you. I think we talked about this a little last time, but not extensively. So there is for the preamble, there was some language approved. I think you were part 2021 that said we alcoholics are people versus men and women.
Right.
And talk to me about how that came around, where it is nowadays. I noticed that one group I go to uses the language, another group I go to does not use the language, and I'm assuming it is an optional sort of.
Well, certainly the office and the boards, nor the conference, is going to tell the fellowship what they can or cannot do, because the fellowship is in charge of Alcoholics Anonymous.
So that's where there is autonomy.
And it's not just the fourth tradition that we are these autonomous, groups of AA, but there is no, in other words, when my group registered with the General Service Office, that didn't say we pass you as an AA group. The only reason that we registered with GSO was so we could get information really from our group to the lower levels, right? And what they send back to us, we may or may not avail ourselves of, but we want to make sure that, they see a group service number and they know who the group is, right? And so along those same lines, I think people, kind of felt like, okay, so this is, quote unquote, coming from the home office, right? There's no such thing. There's no such thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I mean, I've known all my sobriety that if somebody's in an AA meeting and they say, I called New York and New York said to do or not do X, that I think they're amplifying the conversation they had with New York, because the answers that you get from the General Service Office are AA experience suggests that.
Gotcha.
Or what we have seen or heard collectively is this position or that position, followed by, of course, per the fourth tradition, you have the right to be wrong. And no one's even really able to define what wrong is in a minute sense. Now, in a much broader spectrum, if we're an AA group, the fifth tradition is pretty simple, right? We're going to carry our message or its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Now, the definition of what the group's message is up to the conscience of that group. What is that message? I sponsor a guy from Northern California, and recently, I was his service sponsor for years, which meant I helped him with general service, and then I've become the sponsor. And we were having a discussion about this enormous meeting that they have once a week, and they call it the CHIP meeting. And its purpose is you come from all over, the Bay Area to this meeting to celebrate your sobriety, that, your we would call it the cake or the coin, right? The CHIP meeting, meaning the medallion, right? And so it doesn't matter if you're a member of Group X, Group Y, Group Z, and you celebrate it over there, because evidently, there's not a lot of hoopla in that part of the AA world around, like there's no birthday night, right? So, maybe you don't get fed about the fact that, you got X number of years of sobriety in your own home group, but you can go to this meeting and everybody. Now, I'm not saying it's not a tremendous representation of the power of AA, but it's also a place where you're going to get some podium time. You're going to tell us, how it all shook out, how you got where you got, and hopefully with the hand of some power greater than yourself, but who knows? But that's kind of an unusual fifth tradition alignment.
Right.
Right? It's unusual.
Right.
But it's existed evidently for decades. And okay. So,
I want to put this out there in the world also, because you just mentioned the term service sponsor.
Right.
I know a lot of people who have told me that you are their service sponsor. And then there's other people that, you're their sponsor as well, right? And a lot of people have both a service sponsor here in this area, and they have a sponsor, for lack of a better word. So let people, what is a service sponsor, and why do people come to you for that?
It's experience with the third legacy of service, specifically in Alcoholics Anonymous. So, to me, service is not, putting up chairs at your home group or making coffee or chairing an AA meeting or greeting at the door, or that's just being an AA member. So service is, you went to the bathroom and the group elected you to the GSR, and your sponsor is a great sponsor, but has just absolutely no experience with, let's say, the construct of Alcoholics Anonymous. And believe me, we are not organized, but we do have a structure. And in order to know kind of what the purpose of the district meeting is, what the purpose of the area assembly is, what those 12 concepts for world service are telling us really from a spiritual perspective, they just tend to be it's more of a heady wine than the steps and the traditions. And a lot of AA members are it's not that they're, I think, disinclined to do it, but they're not necessarily exposed to that. Now, I have found if I work with someone, quote unquote, as a service sponsor over time, I sometimes tend to do that poorly. I've not had one. I've not had the necessity of that. Both sponsors that I've had since I got sober in AA have had all three legacy. We would call it maybe three legacy sponsorship, right? They've had exposure to all of that. They may not have been delegates. None of them were. Neither one of them were, or trustees, but they had time in the barrel, right? And so what I found that I do poorly is so many things that I think are part and parcel of the recovery program touch on our ability to participate in general service. So, for example, if a man has 2 or 3 school-age children at home, it is probably not the best idea to take a service commitment that's going to get you away on the road almost every weekend for 2 years.
Mm.
It's just not, and that guy or gal, that man, that person, is not certainly the only person, certainly not the only person who can serve in whatever that role is in AA, but he's the only guy that can go to the ballet recital for his little girl. And he's the only guy that can make sure that he coaches the little league team. And he's the only guy that can go to the grocery store for his wife because you know what? She just doesn't want to go to the grocery store, right? He's the only one. And so in order to look at that service commitment objectively, I've stepped, let's say, out of my service sponsor lane. I don't give direction to people I don't sponsor. I do not give direction. But I've certainly given strong suggestions around, understand the time commitment in this, understand the spiritual commitment in this, understand that if you stay sober, the opportunity for you to serve in this capacity exists till the end of time, right? And I believe in Kitchen AA, and I know that's not necessarily our topic for today, but
what's Kitchen AA?
Well, I think that it's a poor exercise of the spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous to restrict them to when we're participating in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
I mean, that's just, my grandmother, God bless her, the only, person who loved me unconditionally that I drug with me when I came to AA. I had 14 years of sobriety when she left the earth at the age of 95. There wasn't one single time in 14 years that she sat down and said, I really like to spend some time finding out about your spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. She was impacted by the fact that AA taught me that if I told her I'd take her to lunch at noon, I was in her driveway at 11:45. That's what she cared about.
Right.
It's Kitchen AA. Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it.
I love that. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about while you're here was the, oh gosh, this is kind of I like to talk about, with you especially, hot topics. And what I mean by that is there's been a lot of conversation lately about, we're in a presidential year election and, people come to meetings with caps, they come with shirts, they come, and it's the entire spectrum, right? It's just not one thing or another. But and AA, as you know, has no, we all know this, has no opinion on outside issues. Is there any sort of guidance or thoughts that you have in that arena?
I think it's important, certainly for me as an AA member, to make sure that I don't in any way negatively influence someone's perception of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm.
And as an AA member, I have the ability to do that. I have heard in my time, not a lot, but some, that there are no rules in AA. But I believe that if we understand the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous, and really the anonymity of Alcoholics Anonymous, that we would want to make sure that nobody had some preconceived notion that might cause them to formulate an opinion about our society. And that can be deportment. And I know that's, quote unquote, outside the scope of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I can tell you.
Deportment?
Deportment.
What do you mean by that?
How I present myself just around the AA building, both before we go inside, while we're inside, and once we leave the inside. When I'm on the AA property, now it's fairly simple for us in my home group to have some discussions around that. without offending anybody because we meet in a church.
Okay, so if somebody comes in and they're wearing something that, and see, it's a slippery slope here a little bit.
Sure, absolutely.
Because what may be offensive to you is not offensive to me, and vice versa, right?
Right.
So do you all go up to people and say, hey, would you please not wear that next time you come to the meeting? Or
We had a guy, I'm not going to, we have a commitment at my group where we go to a sober living, not a house, but a sober living place, and just call out. It's an open speaker meeting. Would anybody like to come to the meeting? It's a weekly commitment. Somebody goes down there, calls out for the meeting. So we always have 4 or 5 visitors. They may or may not actually be members of AA. I mean, we're not worried about, that participation wise because it's an open speaker meeting. They're not going to be called to our podium, right? So we don't have to, concern ourselves about are they alcoholic? Are they not alcoholic? We just call out. And I guess about 2 years ago, we had a guy that came and his T-shirt said FCK in big block letters, and underneath it said, "The only thing missing is you." Now, I'm no prude. I was 32 when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I might not have been as worldly as I thought I was, but I was pretty worldly. And so we have a 10-minute break. It gave me the opportunity to introduce myself because he does not know me. And I said, I'd like it if you would just consider that your shirt, while you may not be communicating the message that I'm inferring that you're communicating, that I can tell you that especially, and I don't want to offend anybody, it could be any sex, but I said, especially with a newcomer woman, that this could be threatening to a newcomer woman. I know that's not your intent, right? But if I don't have the opportunity to communicate with you and all I see are your visual effects, it's detrimental to the purpose of our group.
Gotcha. Didn't fit the tradition.
And he continued to come, not weekly. I don't know how long he lived in the facility, maybe a couple of months. I have no idea whatever happened to the guy, but it's not like he was offended. Now, I have seen, and I've shared with you one-on-one a couple of times, where people have been, somewhat offended. Smoking, for example. I believe, and I'm a smoker, right? I hate to admit that I am, but I am. That's for me. But, smoking too close to the front door of any building, even a building of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? It just tends to be something that, as a social concept, it's not necessarily appealing to the majority, right? Language, right? Absence of profanity offends no one. It just doesn't offend anybody at all. And when we're talking about the accessibility of the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, to the extent possible, I would hope that our personalities are robust, but that our presentation when we are known as AA members is as anonymous as it can possibly be.
Right. The profanity thing, I was even sharing this in my group the other day, is that like if you go to several groups in this area, in fact, I've been to the Mustard Seed group in Chicago. Now, when I went to the Mustard Seed group, it was a combination of street people and guys and gals in business suits and ties and all that sort of stuff. It was a great mix. I absolutely loved it. And they had a policy there that there was no foul language. And there was good reasons for that. All right. And I noted there was somebody who started sharing in the meeting and they said some sort of foul language word. And I don't know if it's still the way. This has been like 25 years ago. It could have changed. I don't know what's going on with the Mustard Seed now, but And several members of the group stood up and says, "No, you can't do that," right? And so that's where the autonomy comes in. But there are people that I don't know. It's just kind of their calling card, and I'm not saying good or bad, right? It's just it's just how they express themselves, but I like how you say that.
Well, I'm talking this month at a group, not in Dallas, but close. And in their format, in an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, they announce that if someone is there and brought children, that they need to be aware that the language may be offensive. Now, I'm paraphrasing, and I'm not a member of that group, of course, but I am basically the program every week for a month, and I have made a disclaimer at the beginning of the talks every week, not to offend anybody, not to get in the group's business, but I have seen children in the room, and I have assured them
they're fine,
that they will not have to explain in tremendous detail what one of the words that I say that they never hear anywhere else, what that means or what it doesn't mean, or never use it or any of that. And I just cannot imagine. I cannot imagine that if collectively, if we're sober as a result of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, that our individual need or want would supersede the health and well-being of our society.
And it kind of goes back to that other thing you were talking about with the no opinions on outside issues and what sort of paraphernalia people may wear at the, shirts, caps, whatever the case may be. I think the general rule is what you're implying is that the individual should kind of look at themselves and think about what is for the greater good here, right? What is best our primary purpose is carry the message to the other alcoholics. And, what is best for the alcoholic, especially the newcomer, right? Somebody who may be coming in and seeing this thing for the first time. What exactly are they going to think?
Absolutely.
Right?
And again, keeping really first tradition stuff, right? What's best for the welfare of Alcoholics Anonymous? Mm-hmm. We had an old timer. We use Clancy's name. I'll use his name. Tom Ivester. Mm-hmm. He's in the big meeting now. Mm-hmm. Died with 65 years of good, long, continuous service-based sobriety. Mm-hmm. And when they did his memorial service, one of his pigeons, sponsored by Tom for 40 years or more, he said, almost everybody comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. If they stay a little while, the individual gets better. But every now and then, somebody comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, and in short order, they realize that they can make AA better. And I'd like to be one of many that believe that, I'm comfortable in my sobriety. I know that a God that I understand, of my own understanding, is root and branch of all of that, and provided me with enough willingness to come into AA and accept some directions and suggestions, but there were a combination of both, suggestions and directions. But it was my willingness that allowed me to put those into practical application. And so Alcoholics Anonymous being the venue and giving me the opportunity to do that, then when I leave AA, hopefully sober, and they put dirt on my head, but when I leave Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd like to leave Alcoholics Anonymous where it's maybe a little bit better, right? Because I know I'm better. So I would like for AA to be better, right? Now, what that looks like, or what the definition of that is up to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's up to Alcoholics Anonymous. But where would we ever go other than AA with the degree of respect that I believe every AA member possesses for the program? They may not necessarily respect the members of the program, but they respect the program. So if we have that amount of respect for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, why would we not treat that experience the same way we treat a loved one's memorial service? Or when somebody gets married? Or any other milestone, graduation of not even necessarily an immediate family member, right? And what we do is, we try to put our best foot forward, right? Whatever that looks like. I don't believe in any way we would wear anything that was easily identifiable as something that was polarizing, something that would be divisive, because we want to make sure that everybody gets together and celebrates whatever it is that we're celebrating. And isn't that what we're doing every time we gather together under the heading of AA? We're celebrating, right? And if we're celebrating, my attitudes, ideas, and actions, and certainly I'm not the benchmark for good behavior necessarily. I'm not the arbiter of conduct, but as a member of my group, yes, I have a voice. Now, I believe in preserving the dignity of the individual at all cost. I am not going to be the guy that jumps up in the middle of the AA meeting and says, "You can't talk like that here." I'm going to do it the way that they did it with me when I came. They put an arm around my shoulder when we walked out the door, and they said, "I need to have a conversation with you about that. I need to tell you about what I saw and heard and felt," and left it to me to reconcile whether or not I thought that what Alcoholics Anonymous wanted me to do was bigger than what I wanted to do. I wish we'd talk more about that book. No, just the original impetus that back in the 2016, 2017.
And just so everybody knows, Jimmy's talking about plain language.
The plain language. The original impetus was because there were many ideas that were sourcing in the fellowship. Graphic novel of the Big Book, for example. A workbook to accompany the book. I mean, there were various submissions that really individually had all these vastly different perspectives, right, about the book. And so in 2019, 2020, when I was on the board, we formed a committee called Tools to Access the Big Book, right? This is a precursor to anything that ultimately became plain language. To just do some work that trustees can do without worrying about offending anybody about, what are the demographics in the United States and Canada? What's the general reading comprehension? All of that kind of stuff. And so we accumulated all that data and basically fed a report to the conference. And that report is what ultimately ended up being the 2021 action to create the plain and simple translation. Now, what happened between 2021 and 2024, we may not have executed that at the speed of trust. I'm using that phrase again on purpose. And as such, what did Bill say? Sometimes the good is the enemy of the best. So, do we release a book because it is in fact approved, but there's some concern around that whole process, right? Do we release a book in its first iteration and then expect that these corrections will just kind of come naturally, right? In other words, you look at the third step prayer or the seventh step prayer, and when you read it, there's absolutely no feeling elicited from those words at all. And it was maybe one of the most impactful things that's happened to you as an AA member. And then you make a proposal to have that put back as closely as possible to the original, keeping in mind that it is, quote unquote, a plain and simple language translation, then I think we've opened an enormous Pandora's box. Because if we have an intimate relationship with the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have to tell you that anybody that I know even fairly well in AA,
I do.
has an intimate association with the book Alcoholics Anonymous, right? If we have that an intimate association, then there are certainly portions of the text where we know absolutely that it is the collective experience, right? I mean, none of those people were writers. None, right? I'm not going to go so far as to say divinely inspired, but it certainly seems like it was a moment in history that will probably never be replicated.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, how far can you go without losing the spiritual substance? Because it's not about black words on white pages. It's about whether or not I'm motivated to make changes. We're not a self-care and abstinence society. Alcoholics Anonymous is not about maintaining physical sobriety forever. I mean, we know sobriety, that the principles of the steps work better when we're physically sober, but physical sobriety is a byproduct of practical application of the principles. The book says bottles are only a symbol. We get down to causes and conditions, right? If I don't take the actions that I took in the past, I won't want to desperately use alcohol as a resource to escape reality. And if I don't need to escape reality, why would I try to avail myself of a tool to make tomorrow seem like it's a million years away, right? I don't need to do that anymore, right? And that scares some people. When I say scare some people, it doesn't offend. I made a talk at a group last night, and I said, we're not about talking all day, every day about what we do to stay physically, in other words, about physical sobriety, right? That's the white knuckle process. We're not white knuckle people, right? We're about, okay, if they give you $5 too much change at the grocery store, you give the $5 back. You know what I mean? Like, you don't kick the dog, you don't treat your kids with no respect. You don't, if your personal relationship is about fidelity and commitment, you don't go outside of the boundaries of that without a mutual discussion and agreement that that's what you're going to do. If you live your life kind of like in a broad way like that, then, who needs to try to drink? There's lots of people in this neighborhood that are having some cocktails this afternoon, and they're doing it successfully. And you and I, my friend, I don't know why we did it so much, because we weren't very good at it. Anyway, that's enough of that. So, yeah.
Well, this has been great, Jimmy. Thank you so much for coming over.
Thank you for having me.
To Studio AA.
Studio AA, I love that. I love that. You tell Ernie that is all that. I mean, he's a sharp dude.
He is a sharp dude. So we'll have to pick it up again at some other point.
Let's do it again.
I'm going to read from page 164 of what we have referenced several times, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I wonder how they would change this in the plain language version. We shall see. But anyway, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us, like me and Jimmy D, as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, Mr. Jimmy D, thank you for coming over today.
Thank you, John. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I always do. Thank you.
Me too. And I know the audience is going to get so much out of this. I really do. It's and this is why I like to take a deeper dive into some of these subjects, because as you know, in the rooms where, and in the stories, usually on my interviews, it's about, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now, which is fantastic. But there's more to AA than that. And I know there are so many people that come to you in this area when they have questions or quandaries about, what's going on in AA at the various levels. And I'm so thankful that you come over here and you're able to share that with our audience. God bless you, my
Thank you,
friend.
sir. And same to you.
It's no doubt we will have Jimmy back on the podcast in the near future. I just got to get him scheduled, but between the two of us, we have a hard time making it happen. But thank you again, Mr. Jimmy D. You are definitely one of a kind. You have one wonderful insight, and I appreciate you sharing your experience, strength, hope, insight, and guidance with the listeners here on Sober Speak. And I do want to mention this. I talked about Ikipa during this episode, and this my bad. I should have went to the website myself and reviewed it, but they do have notices discouraging individuals from taking photographs in the meetings on their website. And also, I want to mention this: is I want to. The word deportment is I got from Jimmy D during this episode. He had to educate me on that word, which I looked up afterwards, and I absolutely love it. So anyway, thanks again, Mr. Jimmy D. All right, now on to a little bit of listener feedback. Peggy Ann writes in and she says, "Hi, John. I joined Al-Anon in April of 1984. I joined ACOA in May of 1989. I spent many years not going to meetings, but wearing a key around my neck." She says that's the key of willingness from step 3 and from the 12 and 12 of AA. I'm doing ACA now 6 nights a week. I got to drive my husband to an AA meeting for his 90 and 90 plus and attended with him. I met women in AA and I went to AA meetings with them. I love the 12 steps and I am honored to listen in to Sober Speak. Well, thank you so much, Peggy Ann. That is fantastic. You've been at this a while and God bless you. And as you know, I introduced you to Cassandra, who is another member that we've had on the podcast in the past. And she actually does a lot of our Instagram posts. And she's been a member of ACA now for an extended period of time. And I thought it'd be good to get you two hooked up. I hope that relationship will yield fruit for you. I think I phrased that right. Yeah. Anyway, Rusty writes in, and Rusty is writing in via the snail mail division. And that is the division that our one and only Mike monitors out in Tempe, Arizona. And Rusty says, "Yo, Lil Ginge." He says, Mackenzie F., episode number 375, All Things Ikipa, truly inspired this fellow, quote, old school, unquote, AA member. You two really did a wonderful job walking listeners through the July 2024 Ikipa conference and held down yonder in Austin, Texas. Her giggles were contagious, which made me enjoy the podcast all that much more. Please send her, Mackenzie, my encouraging words from a member with continuous sobriety since March 13th of 1997. That her new generation assures that AA will continue to be open and available for our future members, still out there trying to make it all work. And then he says, see how it works, chapter 5 of the big book, 4th edition. On a closing note, your declined health while making that podcast shows that you're willing to go to any lengths to serve. I pray you fully recovered. I'm getting there, Rusty. And he says, here's to our promises coming true in 2025. Service, unity, recovery, one day at a time. Rusty R. Thank you so much, Rusty R. And let me just go ahead and explain that once again. He sends in physical letters to our Sober Speak mailbox that Mike monitors, and it's SoberSpeak 1962 East Apache Boulevard, P.O. Box 7925, Tempe, Arizona 85281, for those of you who are also interested in doing the same thing. God bless you, Rusty. Nancy writes in, and Nancy says, "Good morning, John M." Well, good morning, Nancy. She says, "My name's Nancy and I am an alcoholic. I grew up in a pretty violent home due to my dad's drinking, and I swore I would never become an alcoholic, and yet here I am." Laugh out loud. "I've discovered that is not unusual." No, it's not at all. She says, "I was born and raised in Illinois, south suburbs of Chicago, a little town called Worth. After marriage, we started having children. We moved to central Illinois, where I live today. It's a rural farming community with a population of about 3,700. I am the oldest of 3 children, and one of my brothers died from this awful disease, as did my dad. My mom also died, and I believe her alcoholism killed her. However, she would tell you otherwise. We were estranged for many years over alcohol. I don't have any real, quote, rock bottom events to report. I never got a DUI, never was arrested, never drank in the morning. What I did do is make alcohol my priority. And I always made sure I had it on hand. And once I started drinking, it was off to the races. I got sober and stayed sober for 1.5 years just a few years ago. My son and daughter-in-law were expecting, and I was not going to let that baby see grandma drunk. I used Annie Grace's method. This is called, I guess it's a book called This Naked Mind and Willpower. During my sobriety, we lost a family member to pancreatic cancer, and I toasted his memory with the rest of my family. I was quite confident in my sobriety, you see. Well, no surprise, I'm sure. That started my drinking career all over again. I now have 2 grandchildren and a hankering to get sober and stay sober. My last drink was Friday, December 20th of 2024. And through God's grace and AA, I will achieve sobriety. I attended my first AA meeting yesterday morning online, and I walked away with a sponsor. Good for you, Nancy. There's a whole bunch more, like an ex-husband who became violent with his alcoholism and junk like that. But this is my story in a nutshell. I found SoberSpeak while looking for sobriety podcasts and quit lit and quit. I'm sorry. Anyway, she says, "I love SoberSpeak. There are a few speakers I definitely found relatable in recovery through God's grace." Nancy W. Well, thank you and congratulations on your new sobriety there, Nancy. One day at a time here in 2025. Keep us posted, okay? And finally, Gary. Oh, my friend Gary. Gary writes in, he says, "John, just wanted to say happy holidays. I've been listening from the beginning of the SoberSpeak podcast, and I just finished episode 32 about the Crested Butte Conference. Great episode. I am on the committee for Winter Awakening, and this year we have over 100 people registered for the retreat weekend at the end of January. It is something that I look forward to each year. Maybe one of these years I will do the whole week in Crested Butte. It sounds incredible. Wishing you and Shannon," he's talking about my wife, the lovely Mrs. M, "a happy New Year's. Keep doing the work you're doing, and I will keep listening. Gary B." Well, and I'll also say this, if anybody wants any further information on, oh man, I should have had this pulled up. But if you want further information on Winter Awakening, just write me, John, John, at soberspeak.com, and we will get you over to Gary, and he can give you more information on it. In fact, hold on. Let me just Google this here real quick, see where it is. I can't remember. I think I talked about this with Gary, But let's just see here. Sorry. See, now, like I said, really skilled podcasters will have this stuff pulled up beforehand. But it looks like Winter Awakening is in. Oh yeah. Here it is. Okay, well, hold on just a second. Okay, I can see all the beautiful pictures. I just don't see where it is yet. Oh my goodness. It looks absolutely fantastic. But I want to give Gary a little shout out here. Gallery, store, donation, registration. Please email us. Where is it? Anyway, just look up Winter Awakening on Google, and it will tell you. Sounds like there may be a wait list. There's some scholarships. I see everything except for where it is. Anyway, God bless you, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Maybe that'll get people to the website, though, Gary. All right, that's another one in the books. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. And I take this 1 week at a time. I hope to be back next week, but you never can tell. And may God bless you and keep you until then. I still can't find it. I still cannot find this thing. All right. We'll be back next week, hopefully. Bye-bye. I found it. It's in Clayton, Georgia, January 24th through 26th. Anyway, look up Winter Awakening AA conference online. I'm sure you'll find it. Bye.